Today, we're in the lectionary. We're continuing this series, Gather It Up in Jesus. And the title of this sermon is Under the Wings. And our passage is out of the Gospel of Luke. At that very hour, some Pharisees came and said to him, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." He said to them, "Go and tell that fox for me. Listen, I'm casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow. And on the third day, I finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day, and I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you are not willing. See, your house is left to you. And I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, 'Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord.'" It's the word of God for all people. Thanks be to God. We make mistakes. Did you know that? It's something that each of us, no matter how hard we try, will do pretty much daily. I would say we do daily, but just for the sake of the one out there who may get through a day with completely 100%, my hat is off to you. And some of us make more mistakes than others, but we all take part. Messing up is kind of the modus operandi, the standard operating procedure for human beings. It's what we do. And in the greater scheme, we understand that we're all going to make mistakes, and it isn't really all that important except to the one who pointed out the mistake or the neglect. In that face, you can see disappointment and judgment. You can see dismissal, as though everything was summed up in the mistake, as if there was nothing else of value that we might have done in that day. And then we are defined by our brokenness. I am a sinner, you are a sinner, and we feel about that high. Or this high. There are some experiences, some people who can try to make us feel small, make us feel insignificant, make us feel unloved. It's a common human experience. We all experience it. You probably have someone in mind right now who does that to you, who has that power over you, or more correctly, who you have given that power to. I've had many in my life who I gave power to. Foremost of them is my dad. It's my dad. So my dad, he served between the World War II and the Korean War, so that's him in the service. He's the tall one. Let's see, where are we? Over on this side he's with my oldest sister, Dolores. We call her Dodie. She passed away of a heart attack at 51. She is one of the 4 of the 5 kids who had substance abuse issues. And that's my mom on the other side, Georgina. She went by Gina. Beautiful family, just starting out. In the center is my dad as an MP. He was an MP in Japan, and his claim to fame was he got to drive Jane Russell home after a show, and she kissed him on the cheek. If you knew my dad and he was talking about any of that, that story was going to come out. That was just going to happen. And then down on the bottom on this side is my dad as he was most of the time at home. He loved his wine. You'll see him in kind of the center over here. That's our neighbors across the street. His name's Bill. My dad's name is Bill, and that is also Bill. Bill and Tony would come across, and we had a kennel in the backyard when we bought. My dad fancied himself something of a rancher, so he bought a couple of acres, and we had a barn, and I was in 4-H, and so I had a steer, and we had horses, and then we had pigs that we had slop in the morning, and then we had goats. And we had this little silo, and we filled it with chickens, so we had to go gather eggs. And we had rabbits for a brief period of time. But what they say about rabbits is entirely true, because he couldn't build cages fast enough for the rabbits. So we had animals and all that, and a cow. And I was one of those, get up in the morning, go milk the cow. And if you're late and you get in your school, you don't get in your school clothes and go milk the cow before you go to. But if you're late and you get in your granted, she's going to knock you off, and you're going to get in the stuff. So that was also my dad. So, but that in that center is a picture of him in the bar. We took the kennel and made it into a bar. And so he got this nice bar from work, and had a pool table in there, and it was a good place, and it was at home, and they used to drink there every night. On the four-wheeler is my dad with my Uncle Top. Now, my Uncle Top was older. His name's Donald, but he went by, I didn't know that until after he passed, because he was Uncle Top. But he served in World War II. He was old enough that he served in the Battle of the Bulge. And so he was also a serviceman. And then there's another picture of my dad. I think he liked to take pictures and stuff. That's either a camera or a cup. I can't quite tell which. So that's my dad. He's a multifaceted guy. He played softball. He was a pitcher, all-star pitcher in Taft, travel teams and that kind of stuff, which I followed him as, not in pitching, but I played travel leagues. I would do just about anything to try to please him. Just about anything. But it just wasn't to be, right? He was of a different era, I guess. The most prime example that I have, when I was a junior in high school, I hit 2 home runs, a double and a triple. And I tried to steal home, but I sprained my ankle coming down the line. And I got tagged out. The conversation in the game, about the game on the way home, what do you think it was about? Getting tagged out at home. What were you doing? Why would you do that? Why would you try to steal home? That was my dad. And it was like that in every area of my life. And unfortunately, see, I used that as fuel for a while, for a long time. But at some point, I quit trying. I messed up. One of the biggest mistakes of my life was quitting. Quit trying. I'm never going to please that man. Doesn't matter what I do. And that was a contributing factor to my burgeoning addiction. And don't mishear me. My addiction was my fault. It's me. I made those choices. I am responsible for all of them. But there are contributing factors for each of us. And I knew I was never going to be good enough for the one person I wanted to show. I just wanted him to know I was good enough. As an aside, please hear this. If that is your story, and the person you want to please desperately doesn't acknowledge you or your effort, don't quit. Please, don't quit. The trap that we fall into is what I call going to a dry well for a drink of water. My dad didn't know how to give me what I was looking for. He was raised in an era of, his dad was abusive to him. We had conversations later when we had a different kind of relationship. He didn't know how to give me what I was looking for, but I kept going, right? Kept going. I'm going to throw the bucket down into the well. I'm going to bring it up and give me a drink of water, and it's sand. Well, maybe this time, sand. I kept doing it. Kept going to the dry well, looking for that drink. And the irony is, there were people in my life who had water. There are people in all of our lives who have water. So if that's you and you're you keep throwing that bucket in thinking that it's going to turn out different this time, find somebody who has water. Find a person. What I mean by that is there's somebody who will encourage you. There's somebody who will hear you. There's somebody who will lift you up. And love that other person, but know that if they just can't do it, they just can't do it. Now, an interesting thing happened. When my mom got sick and I was getting sober, and I was seeing a counselor. Some of you have heard my testimony. My early recovery was seeing a counselor and a psychiatrist and going to a 12-step meeting every day. I was not healthy. I didn't know how to do a lot of the stuff that people are raised to know how to do. I didn't know how to do relationships, didn't know how to set boundaries. So I started setting boundaries with him. So when he would go negative on me, I would just say to him, working with a counselor, remember, Dad, I love you, but I just can't be around you when you do this. And I would leave. I'd come back, but I'd set that limit. And over the course of time, and what it was he was adult, and every time I got around him, I was little Mike, you know. And over the course of setting boundaries, we both became adults. And when my mom got sick, I was the one that my dad confided in about all of his stuff growing up. I know my dad now, you know. And he really didn't have it in him to give me what I wanted, what I had hoped for. Except once. We were in Oregon. I was living in Oregon. And it was a card. And my dad wasn't a card guy. But he sent a card. I think I had graduated from Oregon State, or I was enrolled at Oregon State. And he sent a card. He was dying. He had colon cancer. And and it just said, "I am proud of you." And it kicked me right into counseling again. Because I had Dad in this little pigeonhole, you know, and he said, "No, I am not. I am more than that." But know that there are people in your life who will encourage you and lift you up and help you forward. I asked Mike to sing that song, "Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child," because there's something inherently powerful about that song. It's a Negro spiritual. And it needs to be said that I don't presume to know what it feels like to be a slave during those terrible years back in that time when we had slavery. Whatever I've experienced is a pale shadow to what those thousands faced in that system. But a part of the power of the spiritual is identification. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child a long way from home. Who hasn't had that experience? Sometimes we feel like we're far away, like we're in a far land. Who hasn't let that fear grip them at a weak or a painful moment? It's part of the human condition that there are times when we will feel disconnected, diminished, and unloved, and uncared for, and wonder what's going on because we're so very alone. There can be tragic circumstances that bring that about, that cause it, or it may be the result of our own failures. Did you know that we make mistakes? Or it may be a misunderstanding, or it could be, who knows what the thing is. There are a million things, a million moments that can drive a wedge between us and the world, between us and those we love, between us and ourselves, which is ironic. Love your neighbor as yourself. You know where that starts? With yourself, because if you can't love yourself, who wants to hate their neighbor if you hate yourself? It says love your neighbor as you love yourself. The inference is love yourself. Love yourself. Love yourself. And we can have that wedge drive between us by often the stuff that goes on up here. Even between us and God. Wait a minute, right? God, how can we feel cut off from God? Well, David did. Right? Many times, if you read the Psalms, this is just one. All day and all night I cry and do not eat. All day my enemies say to me, "Where is your God?" And it's probably like, "Where's your God, buddy? You keep touting this God of yours. Where is he? We're doing whatever we want. You're hiding over here in a cave. Where is he? Where's this God of yours?" Can we feel as though our sin, our brokenness, our lack can cause God to turn away from us in disgust and dismissal? That's part of the human condition too, but I assure you, there is nothing that you did or will do that God doesn't already know. And there is no sin greater than God's grace. No sin greater than God's grace. Remember this? Why have you forsaken me? See, we aren't the first to shout that from some cross or some pain or some emptiness or some loneliness. I love that Jesus experienced this life. God is connected to us through him, and it's beyond me. We aren't the first to whisper that in the loneliness of our bedroom. Afraid that the words haven't gone any further than the ceiling, right? Where are you? I'm trying. Help. Or my favorite prayer, ah! He can interpret groans. He can interpret that one, right? Sometimes we feel like a motherless child, a long, long way from home. So what is the antidote? How do we continue in those moments when we feel that way, when we're a long way from where we long to be? We listen, we remember, and sometimes we lament. And there is some considerable agreement in our gospel text for this week that Luke is kind of moving some things around, because in Matthew's gospel, the lament over Jerusalem comes right before the Passion. And Luke has it in a different spot, but the message is the same. Jesus is about to enter Jerusalem for the last time. He's about to lay down his life. And it's out of that event that Jesus begins with this word, with this desire to gather the children of Jerusalem. And it certainly makes sense that on the brink of the events that would lead to his death, that Jesus would be lamenting missed opportunities. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets who are sent to you. And what do we do about this thing with the Pharisees? Are they really warning? This is the Pharisees. Are they really warning him? Kind of weird. It said, the warning from the Pharisees about Herod's rages and Jesus' lament over the city. And what do we do with that? Because it's kind of odd, right? That the Pharisees are really warning him. Well, I don't think Jesus thought they were. And these are the guys who would like nothing more than for Jesus to find a speedy and messy death. Get this guy out of here. These are the guys who stumble all over themselves to find tests he can't pass and ask him questions he can't answer and fail every time. And now we're suddenly supposed to think they're out. Jesus, Herod's out to get you. You better go. Even Jesus knows that it's not about that. He says, go and run on back to that puppet master pulling your strings. That's what Jesus says. He says, Jesus declares that he's in charge of his own destiny. He's in charge of his worth and his value. He isn't planning to run and hide from anyone. And I love this. Know whose you are, and you'll know who you are. Walk in your authentic identity as determined by your Creator. And before you try to live without instructions as to what your identity really is, read the owner's manual daily, the Bible. It's the best advice anyone ever gave me. Read it, and it will change your life for the better forever. Jesus knew to whom he belonged. He's not far from home. It might make perfect sense that having declared his own sense of belonging to his mission and to the one who sends him on this journey, that he pauses to reflect on the object of that mission, the ones he wants to gather, as he thinks about Jerusalem that doesn't receive prophets well. And it seems right that his heart would break for those who said no the moment he reminded them of the cost he will have to pay. Besides, he's met the fox, so now he heads to the hen house. Go and tell that fox, that scavenger, trickster, that unscrupulous schemer, that his power, this power of destruction, has its limits, and it doesn't reach to me. And having chased away the fox, he then wants to gather the chicks, his people. It's as if Luke is presenting us with an option here. Do we find our safety and security in the powers that function out of fear and self-interest? Or do we find our connection and our sense of meaning and purpose in those who seek to define us by amassing account of our failures and disappointments? Or do we run to the one who shelters us under his wings, who is broken and poured out to an unimaginable love for us? Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long, long way from home. We need to know love like Christ offers. The love that draws us close. To cling to that love. Cling to that hope. Because when we walk through those valleys, when we're in that depth, when we feel like we're motherless children, God's love can carry us through. Always. And we need to be in the business of loving others like that too. All around us, at any given time, are those who feel disconnected, those who feel as though no one cares, that no one is there for them. There are those who feel that their mistakes define them in the eyes of others, who need for us to spread our wings and gather them in. The second verse of the spiritual says, sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. To be forgotten, to be insignificant, unloved is also a common experience. Our world today is so busy, we often don't have time for each other. Jesus' love flowing through us. I preach the body of Christ so often because each of us is integrally important. We're an integral part of a greater being, the church. His love flowing through us, each one, as we deal with one another in the midst of success and failure, is the antidote. May I ask what the antidote is? His love flowing through each of us, regardless of up or down, that we love one another is the antidote. Doesn't matter how much you've messed up, he still wants to gather you as a hen gathers her brood. Still wants to be your God. Still wants to be your father, your parent. Wants to love on you a little bit. And if you wonder, well, I've done a lot of stuff. Well, check this out. And I'm going to put up 3 lists up here and down here. For the online, it's down here. And mine's different, but I'm going to read mine. But there's others, so. This is the Bible, that book I talked about a minute ago. It talks about some of these people. Do you know Abraham was old? He said, you're going to have a child, and your descendants are going to be as numerous as the stars in the sky. And he's like, 90, 100 years old, going, I'm at 0 right now. And Sarah goes, I'm at 0 too. Abraham was too old. Elijah was suicidal. The one who beat the prophets of Baal, he laments and says, God. Joseph was taken by his brothers, thrown in a cistern, and then sold into slavery into Egypt. That's Joseph, the father of the 12 tribes. Job, we don't always think about this, but he lost everything. He went bankrupt, lost his family. Moses had a speech impediment. He had a speech problem, and so they gave him Aaron. Gideon was afraid, and Gideon even was a tester of God. He's like, well, God, I'll do it if this fleece is wet in the morning and the ground is dry all around it. And in the morning, you know what happened? The fleece was wet and the ground was dry. So what did Gideon do? He went, thank you, God, that's it. No, Gideon goes, I don't mean to test you, but this time, could you reverse it and make the fleece wet and the ground dry? And you know what happened? That happened. And Gideon went, okay, I give. He was afraid. Samson was a womanizer of the Philistines before he pulled the temple down on himself and committed suicide. Rahab was a prostitute and helped the people of God. The Samaritan woman was divorced and divorced and divorced and divorced and divorced. Noah was drunk. Jeremiah was too young. Jacob was a cheater. His name, he pulling at the heel. David was a murderer when he saw Bathsheba and sent, what's his name? Bathsheba's husband, that's his name, to the front lines and had him killed. He was a murderer. Jonah ran from God and got swallowed by a big fish. I do want to talk to him in heaven. Naomi was a widow. Peter, I'll never deny you. Oops, right? 3 times. Martha worried about everything. Zacchaeus was too small and very money hungry as a tax collector. The disciples fell asleep while praying on the last night. Paul was a Pharisee who persecuted the Christians, was there at the stoning of Stephen before becoming a Christian. And all those other ones, right? What's your excuse? Can God use you? Not rhetorical. Can God use you? Yeah, God can use you. Where you are and who you are. He'll do it. He will equip you. He doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called is one of those turns of phrases we talk about a lot. What's it called up there? He doesn't call the qualified. I don't care. Just show up. He'll do neat stuff. It'll be cool. Because here's the other thing. Read that for me. In all things, God works for the good of those who love him and been called according to his purpose. All means all. That means that you're up or down or sideways or on your head or on your side or doing cartwheels or whatever you're doing, hanging over a cliff, going, help, I'm barely hanging on. God will work it. He'll work it out. Show up, ask him, walk with him, do it. Who you are is not a surprise to God. Who you are is not a surprise to God. Who you can be might be a surprise to you. The first step, come home. Be gathered up by Jesus. The one who longs to wrap his wings around you is waiting and offering and hoping. It may seem like a long way, and you may feel like a motherless child a long, long way from home. But God is with you in that place, and he'll walk with you all the way home. Come home. Be gathered up. It's as close as a prayer.